Shalom, WJC family. It's time for our weekly Torah talk. This week in synagogue, we will be reading Parshat VaYishlach. Our ancestor Yaakov, Jacob, having sojourned, he says, with his uncle Lavan, lived, in fact, for 20 years in exile. 2 weeks ago, we read the Parsha where he fools his father, tricks his brother out of the blessing, and ends up fleeing at his mother's advice to the place where she's from, to her brother Laban's house, Lavan's house. And he's been there for 20 years. He married 2 daughters, acquired 2 concubines. It's a little hard to understand exactly what is the role of Zilpah and Bilhah. They're maidservants. They become concubines. Acquires tons of wealth, all of basically Laban's household, and is now coming back at God's command to the promised land, to the land of Canaan. And who does he know is waiting there for him but his brother Esav, his brother Esau, who he had tricked 20 years ago. It seems like they have not made amends. Even, there were caravans going all the time between the place where Yaakov was living and Esav was living, but it doesn't seem like they've made amends because Yaakov is coming, and we read in chapter 32, verse 8 of Genesis, Vayira Yaakov me'od vayatzer lo. He was very, very frightened, and it distressed him. And the commentaries are a little, shocked by this for 2 reasons. First of all, he came at God's behest. Right, he's had all of these dreams. He remained safe his whole time with Lavan. Lots of commentaries tell us he was able to be, shomer mitzvot. He was able to live a Jewish life because he said, I lived with Lavan, im Lavan garti. And garti in numerology, Jewish gematria numerology, is 613, and there's 613 mitzvahs. So he says, well, even with Lavan, I was able to be righteous. I did all my mitzvot. Now he's coming back at God's behest, with God's promise of protection. What is he afraid of? And not only does he say it's afraid once, but it says he's afraid twice in the sentence, right? 2 different verbs for being frightened. So Rashi, in commenting on it, the medieval Jewish commentator, he says, look, he's afraid that he's going to be killed. They're going to get into a fight, he and Esav is going to kill him. And he's also afraid, the second word for fear or worried or distressed, is that he's afraid that he's going to win, that he's going to be forced in battle to kill someone. And it's a very fascinating idea, right? The idea that we can lose even if we win, or in our victory there will be aspects that will feel like a loss. There's great, great wisdom in this idea. It's something that I often teach when I do premarital counseling with a couple. I give them rules for fighting. One of the rules is, if you fight to win, you've probably already lost. Right? We Jews, we love a good fight. It's in the Talmud. You could have a machloket, a disagreement b'shem shamayim. For the name of heaven, an argument can be a connection to the divine. It's a very Jewish idea. And a central one when it comes to how Jews learn together. If you ever saw pictures of a yeshiva or a Beit Midrash setting, Jews in pairs, people in pairs, across one from the other, and they're arguing over the text. That's a machloket min hashamayim, like l'shem shamayim. I mean, an argument in the name of heaven. But how do we know? That's always a win. But how do we know when we're having that kind of argument or when we're having, a different kind of argument? The Ralbag, another Provençal commentator, a little later than Rashi, comments on Rashi, and he says, in fact, the verb for being distressed is even more stringent than the verb for being afraid. And therefore, he is more afraid of winning, of having to kill someone, than he is of being killed himself. The Ralbag says it in a way to emphasize Jacob's righteousness. And, a tzaddik, a righteous person, should be more concerned about the harm they do to others than even harm coming to themselves. But I think there's really something to this, because many of our disagreements, many of our machlokot are not l'shem shamayim. And sometimes we don't know the difference. And one way to see the difference is if we're fighting to win and we're not thinking about the consequences of victory, then we are probably not doing this l'shem shamayim. We're doing it l'shem in the name of our ego, in the name of victory, whatever that means. And the problem is, as I tell these couples who I counsel all the time, is you may win, but if you have reduced the person you love to a puddle and they're crying and you've wounded them in some permanent way, well, you're not going to feel the glory of that victory for very long. And the truth is, what we can learn from the fear of Jacob, the distress of Jacob here as he's about to meet Esau, his brother, is that every victory comes with its difficult consequences. It doesn't mean that we can't have a machloket l'shem shamayim, but it means that we need to always, or the Torah's advice is that we should always think about what comes after that victory. Think about what are the consequences for us. Think about what are the consequences for our adversary. And that's true in our personal relationships especially. It's certainly true in our communal relationships. How often do we see where, one side of a community discussion wins, but in such a way that totally alienates the other side? We see communities fall apart, communities split over this. And even in grand sort of world, political and national ideas, right? There's always the will. We always have to measure the will to win against the consequences of that victory. And if nothing else, at least plan for that sense of loss, for the sense of responsibility that will come after a victory. We can fear loss, but in many ways, the wise person, like our ancestor Yaakov, fears winning even more. I wish us all success, but more importantly, I wish us all that our machlokot should be l'shem shamayim, that the disagreements we enter, we should engage in l'shem shamayim, in a way to make the world holier, to make the world better. And when we feel our ego coming into it, we feel our will to victory, to win for winning's sake, especially when we're engaged in important matters or with people that we love, that we remember to pump the brakes, to slow down, and that we really should be just as distressed, at least as distressed, about the results of a victory as we are of the results of a loss. If we do that, if we're able to do that, not only will our disagreements be more productive, but we can even feel in those disagreements the sanctity of God, where that at the end of it, when our adversaries are now our allies again, and since most of the adversaries in our life are our family, our friends, our community members, that's really what this is all about, that we don't confuse the battle with the person, that we don't confuse a win with a conquest. That's how we'll know we're doing it right. May we all follow the example of Yaakov in our parsha here. May we all tread carefully into the disagreements of our lives. They will come. May they all result in greater spiritual growth, greater spiritual strength, and stronger and even more valuable relationships at the end of that machloket. I wish you all Shabbat Shalom. May it bring you peace, only peace, no arguments. And should there be arguments, may they all resolve themselves in this kind of positive way. Shabbat Shalom.